Good evening and welcome to the Columbus Common Council's Special Committee of the Whole meeting tonight, Tuesday, June 30th, 2020, at 6 p.m. in Columbus City Hall chambers. We are meeting this evening to discuss a petition circulating having to do with the Christopher Columbus statue. Thank you all for being here. Pat, will you please take the roll?
Gray,
Present.
McCabe,
Present.
Pfeifferone,
Present.
Reed,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Tome,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. This meeting has been noted with the proper state statutes and local ordinances. This evening, I guess I'm looking just for a motion to approve the agenda.
Alder Pfeifferone will make a motion to approve the agenda.
Reed will second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Number 4 is to discuss and approve the procedure for our meeting this evening. Specifically regarding the public comment section of the Abby Adams petition, it is up to council, I guess, how we want to proceed with this meeting, and are there any limitations that suggested, such as 2 minutes per person, state your name, address, that type of thing? Any discussion from the council?
I guess 2 minutes or 3 minutes, it depends on how many people we're going to be having to speak, which is hard to know. So I'd almost err on the slower side of 2 minutes.
How many
Joe?
people do we currently have signed up to
We
speak?
currently have 6.
Okay. Do we expect that we'll have more than 6 people willing to speak? We have more than 6 people in the room right now. I guess what we should ask is that if people are going to speak, are they required to sign a piece of paper or raise their hand if they wish to be recognized once we open the the public comments, I guess, is what we need to discuss. I have no problem with 3 minutes for people that are signed up, but is that going to be the same limitation for anyone else that wants to be recognized that didn't sign up, I guess, is the point.
Well, I think I can start maybe by asking, is there anybody else who didn't get a chance to sign up this evening that also wished to speak? If you didn't get a chance to sign up on this sheet, asking the people here. So I see a couple hands. Okay. That brings our total to 8 so far. I'm okay with 3 minutes as well. Ready? Okay. Okay. Read.
Oh, I'm also okay with 3 minutes. I wanted to know if we want to plan ahead on if someone is inspired to speak. Do we want to give that a specific time limit also? Most likely shorter, perhaps 2, if someone is not signed up.
I have no objection to that currently. No, so 3 minutes total, or do you want to put what you're saying is 2 minutes on the people who are not signed up additionally?
Yes, I feel like there might be
Some more, okay. Council, okay with that procedure? Mike?
I am, just so long as that if anyone feels inspired to speak that hasn't signed up, that they take the time to raise their hand to be recognized, that they don't just begin speaking out of turn. Thank you.
Okay. So then, as far as getting started this evening, I know before the public comment section is opened, wanted to give a little bit of a background on this subject matter, and I'm not sure. I think the city attorney, Paul Johnson, is going to give us a little bit of a rundown. Is that correct, Paul? Sure. All right. Thank you.
I really like standing over here. This is neat. Good evening, Council. I want to break my comments down to you into a couple of different categories tonight. The first is to just give a little bit of the history of what I know about the statue, which is not everything, but I was involved when it came into the city's ownership, so I'm going to start there. The city acquired the Christopher Columbus statue in 2012. It was I will call it a gift from the 1992 Quincentennial Celebration Committee to the city of Columbus. The Quincentennial Committee had purchased the statue as part of a celebration that took place prior to 2012, and they had sited the statue on land that was owned by Dan Amato at the time. Thank you. Dan had transferred a small piece of land to the committee so that it could site the statue in its present location out by the 6016 intersection. And in 2012, the Quincentennial Celebration Committee decided that it wanted to disband, and it offered to transfer its assets to the city. The assets included the statue itself, the small piece of land that the statue was sited on, a small amount of cash. I want to say a couple $1,000s, but I'm not sure. And then a couple other mementos from this celebration. The statue was conveyed to the city. The city accepted it at a meeting of the city council in January of 2012, if I remember correctly. And there was an agreement adopted between the committee and the city that allowed the statue to change hands. When the statue changed hands into the city ownership, there was no strings attached. There is not a provision that requires the city to do anything specific with it if it wants to dispose of it at some point in time. There was no right of first refusal to buy it back or anything like that. So as we sit here today, the statue is owned by the city with no strings. To fast forward a little bit, when the Highway 60 and 16 intersection project was done in 2015, the Department of Transportation and the city did a fair amount of title research and land research regarding the actual location of that statue, trying to determine if it was on city property or DOT property. At the time that the street project began, the statue was on city property. As we sit here today, the statue is on DOT right-of-way as far as we can tell. There was a series of deeds done in 2015 in which the Department of Transportation obtained a small piece of land from the city in order to widen out the right-of-way in that particular area where the statue currently sits. So by looking at the by looking at the Columbia County maps, the two parcels come to a very narrow point, and the statue sits right on that point. But it looks to me like it is on the DOT right-of-way instead of on land owned by the city. Now, my knowledge of the DOT will tell me that they will be very happy if the statue is no longer in their right-of-way. They don't like things in the right-of-way that don't belong to them. At the same time, they have never asked the city to move the statue. They took this piece of right-of-way without any encroachment agreement or any other agreement that allowed the statue to stay there. They just took the land and didn't worry about it. So that is the history of the statue as far as I know it. There was some conversations a couple, I want to say probably 2017 or so, about potentially moving the statue to a different location. At that time, one of the issues concerned how exactly would that be accomplished, because number one, it's very heavy. Number two, it's very large. And number three, it's going to be very expensive to move it. When those issues were discussed among the council and some of the other parties that were having this discussion, nothing happened. So the conversation has been had not in the confrontational setting that you might be looking at tonight, but in just as a general matter of trying to move it to a better location. So that is what I know about the statute itself. I want to talk a little bit, as long as I have the podium, about the petition that has been filed. When you file, there are lots of different ways to file a petition to a governing body. This is one of them. The petition has been filed by concerned people. The petition that is before you tonight is not one that requires you as a council to take any specific action. It is there to be discussed and to be deliberated and to be decided however you wish to go forward, but it is not a statutory petition that specifically requires you to do anything with it, okay? And I want to make that clear, because there is a specific statutory procedure that would require you to do either one thing or another thing to resolve the petition. That is not what this is, okay? I guess I would call this an advisory petition more than anything else. So that frees you up to address this however you wish when you decide how you want to go forward with this, either tonight or at a future meeting. At the end of your deliberations tonight, you'll have three different choices as far as how you want to end tonight's meeting. One is to move this forward to the council for a yes or no vote at a future date. Second is to simply disregard it and not do anything with it going forward. Or third is to table it tonight, ask for more information depending on how your public comment goes and your deliberation goes tonight, and then bring this back to committee of whole meetings in the future. I mean, those are your three choices. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, with that, I think we're okay to move on to number 5, which is public comments regarding the Abby Adams petition. I see on here I have 6 people signed up on here, and then I will address anybody else in the room that also wants to talk. I think the easiest way to do this, I guess, is just in line with how people signed up. So I think that's what I'm going to do. First, I have signed up to speak is Cora Dahl. Thank you, Cora.
Hi, I'm Cora Dahl. I'm going to be a junior at Columbus High School. And I love my hometown of Columbus. I've been going to school here since 4K, and I can tell you a little something about everyone in my class. I'm active in FFA, Interact, Forensics, and I plunged the polar plunge for my high school. I love going to the antique mall and getting coffee with my friends at Forward Pharmacy. I hope to live here forever and raise my future children here. With that being said, the city of Columbus does not reflect the ideals and hateful acts Christopher Columbus has committed and has represented. As many of you know, our town was founded by Albert Dickinson and Louis Ludington. Dickinson, a soldier, camped alongside Crawfish River after returning from taking a tribe of Sioux Native Americans to a reservation across the Mississippi during the Black Hawk Wars. After he was discharged from the army, him and Ludington bought Columbus for $1.25 an acre. Dickinson named the land after Christopher Columbus, who was a hero at the time. I got these facts off of the City of Columbus's website, the same website that still calls the people of Sioux Indians, an inaccurate name that has been formed because Columbus thought he was in India when he first arrived in America. You might be thinking at this point, well, isn't this a similar story to every town's founding? Yes, sadly it is, but how many towns still glorify it with a giant statue of a man who caused so much pain and suffering, depicted as a hero? Columbus represents the start of decades upon decades upon decades of suffering of Native Americans, suffering we are still benefiting from. Some of you will write me off as a naive 15-year-old, but you are never too young to start showing compassion and kindness to those around you. Our town has changed a lot since the days of Dickinson and Ludington, and the city of Columbus is beautiful and kind and welcoming. Why should that be overshadowed by an old statue with paint chipping and overgrown with weeds and ideals of the past? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Jack Sanderson.
Hello, thank you. My name's Jack Sanderson, longtime resident of the city, born here, raised here, former alderman. In fact, I think I'm the last surviving member of the sesquicentennial commission that we had celebrating Columbus's 500 years. I was on the council in 1992 when we went through a lot of motions to celebrate Columbus, celebrate our namesake, and I'm still proud of those efforts. I think at that time, Columbus certainly did not have the bad name that he has acquired in the past 2 or 3 decades, and you have to ask yourself why. Where are these people learning of all these terrible misdeeds that Columbus did? I just published a op-ed piece in the State Journal, and it ran in the local paper as well, making clear that a lot of these empty allegations, not facts, allegations were brought about by a scallywag named Francisco Bobadilla, who wanted Columbus's job as the governor of Hispaniola. And so he made up some stories, and they caught wind of that. The king and queen invited him back to Spain to answer these charges. He never made the trip. Columbus's title as governor of the Americas was reinstated as the admiral of the Ocean Sea and the New Americas at that time. I'm not an expert on Columbia's history, and I suspect there's not a lot of them in this room either. But if you were going to do anything drastic like take down the statute, I'm going to suggest that you ought to have adequate study groups, that there's no rush to do anything, and it would be a rewarding experience for everybody participating in the study group to make their recommendations of what they think he did or what he did not do. Plus, this is a part of a broader effort. I mean, there are statues being torn down all over the city. We are in the middle of a civil war, it seems like. Cities are burning. The idea that we can make a judgment in this time of chaos and crisis in the middle of a presidential election year, which people are determined to create chaos, I think is rather rich. The more long-term, rational thing to do would be able to spread this way out, give it plenty of time to think about what you're going to do, and do it with a lot of thought and a lot of deliberation, which is not happening right now. I don't think the allegations are true based upon what I know, and I would ask for your careful consideration in any future deliberations. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Next up, I have Joe Roach. Pardon me if I pronounced it incorrectly.
My name is Joe Roach. I'm not a resident of Columbus. I live to your east in the town of Alba. I, however, did serve 17 years on the Columbus School Board, 10 years on the Police and Fire Commission, and 10 years on the Rural Fire Group. Back when I was on the school board, we actually taught history in Columbus. I am amazed at the ignorance of history by our present school graduates, or members of the school. They're not learning history. It's something of the imagination. Christopher Columbus brought Christianity to the Americas. We were founded as a Christian nation. I'm proud of it. I hope you all are. Our country has been great in the history of the world. I'm proud to see the statue of Christopher Columbus on the west side, but I wish Columbus, the city of Columbus or somebody, would mow the grass and weeds so it looks more beautiful. You should be proud of that statue and of our name Columbus and of Christopher Columbus. And just a little history that most Christians, and even I'm a Catholic, do not know. I would like to tell you a little story about Columbus, if I could. Way back when he got permission from Portugal to sail this way, his ships needed a name. And somehow he got inspired. They named it the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. Our Lady paints girl. 50 years after his voyage, in the little town of Guadalupe in Mexico, our Blessed Mother appeared to an Indian, I'm losing it, Juan Diego. 3 times. She wanted Juan Diego to have a church built. Guadalupe is right near Mexico City. Anyway, for him to finally convince the bishop to do this, he ended up with some roses that couldn't be grown at that time of the year. And here he opens his cloak up, and there's a picture of Our Lady as a young girl. It's still in Guadalupe. After this happened, within 40 years, 7 to 8 million Native Americans, Indians, converted to the Christian religion. Columbus brought Christianity to the Americas. Yeah, I know the time has expired.
Thank you, Joe.
Just remember, Santa Maria, Pinta, Nina, Our Lady paints girl. It's a scientific fact. It happened. I'll tell you one little other thing about
We appreciate
this
you
picture.
commenting.
When the scientists
Point
took
of
a
personal
microscope
privilege
to
here,
the
Joe,
eye-
with all due respect, we have a 3-minute limit that we've all agreed upon, and we need to stick to that. If we have
They
more
could
time
see in the
after,
pupil a picture of Juan Diego. It's still there.
could you please take a
The
seat,
scientist is
Mr.
still
Roach?
there.
Please take a seat, Mr. Roach. Thank you.
Next up on the list, I have Joe Hammer.
My name is Joe Hammer. I live at 162 East School Street in Columbus, been a resident and have worked here for 41 years. I concur with a lot of the statements that have been said about the support of the Christopher Columbus statue. And again, it comes down to learning history. And unfortunately, history is not being taught correctly in our schools. It's being selectively taught. You have some comments there by Richard Sheard, which I fully agree with, Jack Sanderson, which I fully agree with, and Joe, that I fully agree with. Again, history. He talked about Our Lady of Guadalupe. That is history, scientific history. In regards to the petition, there were 1,730 signatures, proposed signatures, or alleged signatures. I counted 132 that were actual residents of Columbus, Wisconsin. There might be more because it said Columbus, U.S. There are 26 Columbuses in the United States. So have no idea how many of those are accurate. Of those 132 that I counted, some of those I believe may be somewhat questionable about whether they still live in the city of Columbus. This is a city of Columbus situation or issue. And it should be addressed by Columbus, not by somebody from Bangladesh. I believe I read, there are different parts of the world where we got people signing a petition about Columbus, Wisconsin. As a council, you do have the responsibility to take into account the facts, not allegations, but actual facts. If you want to know about Christopher Columbus, Dan Amato, sit down and talk with him. That man has done tons of research and knows better than any of us here. And that's what I'm asking for, is that you use your due diligence to do the research that needs to be done and not make any kind of a drastic decision. And if worst case comes, my backyard will have a Christopher Columbus sign, because I'll hire people to move it and put it in my yard. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Abby Adams.
Hello, my name is Abby Adams. I'm the person who started the petition today. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for talking about this today, and thank you to all the community members that decided to come here to speak about it, even if you don't necessarily agree with me. I'd just like to say that a lot of people have been saying that we don't necessarily know the full history of Christopher Columbus. I would argue that while we don't necessarily know if he was single-handedly responsible for a lot of the atrocities that happened to Native Americans in our country, he definitely did set a precedent for how our country treated millions and millions of Native Americans. And I think that by having that symbol outside of our city that has Christopher Columbus outside, that's not setting a good tone for what our city of Columbus is like, because we are a very accepting and very loving city. Our sense of community is very strong. And I think that by taking down this statue, especially now, if we make that decision, that's going to be sending a message to not only the city of Columbus, but to the world, that we are a strong community, that we care about these issues. And Christopher Columbus does not represent us. And yeah, I do not think that we should have that statue out there. And a lot of other things, many people have argued, yes, he brought Christianity to the United States. What you don't necessarily think about is how he forced millions of Native Americans to convert to Christianity through horrible ways, through torture, through forcing them to leave behind their cultures, through things along those lines. And I think that we need to take into consideration everything along those lines instead of just leaving our statue here because it's a part of our history. I'm not saying we should rename our city of Columbus. I'm not saying we should destroy our history. I'm saying we should try to give that history more context. We should be teaching the truth instead of just honoring that man. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Next up to speak, I have John Walls.
Would you please tell me every minute so I'll know how I'm going? My name is John Waltz. I'm a general surgeon. I've been a general surgeon here in Columbus. Not that it matters, I'm also a former state air surgeon of the state of Wisconsin. I would like to commend these young people being interested, but I have to say that, as has been stated, history is no longer taught, and it's no longer taught accurately. Christopher Columbus has actually a lot of history that he was extremely pro-Native American, in spite of the fact that he called it India. Well, don't blame him for that. I want to mention another Spaniard, Junipero Serra, or something like that, who was extremely pro-Indian, pro-Native American, and established all the cities up along the coast of California that have Christian names. And his statue is being torn down as well, or has been torn down. Okay, I'm a member of the Knight of Columbus. I'm not speaking for the Knights of Columbus. I've been at the meetings, and I just want to say this, that although I don't have the official go-ahead of all this, there's a lot of Knights that agree with me that we want to save the statue no matter what. So if you as the city decides that it shouldn't be there, it has to be moved, then we would want to do what we can to save it. You mentioned that it's hard to move. It's really not that hard to move. I have a backhoe with a boom on that can lift rafters up. The statue weighs approximately 500 pounds, I'm told. With the sword up, it goes up 14 feet, but the statue itself is about 9 feet without the sword. Of course, it's all one piece. And incidentally, I talked to Dan Amato, and you thought it was a couple $1,000s. He told me that the city was given a stipend of $5,000 to maintain the statue, but that's neither here nor there. It's just an interest. And we are in favor of keeping the statue because Christopher Columbus was a very decent, strong, pro-Native American person, and he is indeed a hero, and we have to be proud of that. And if we go ahead and in a panic mode, strike down everything like it's happening throughout the country, we may be sorry for that later and may not be able to undo it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we've gone through all of the people signed up to speak. Would you please raise your hand if you'd like to speak? State your name, sir.
Dave Schimmel.
Dave, please. Thank you.
I'm Dave Schimmel. I live over behind the hospital. I've got family, 9 or 10 scattered people in Columbus and others nearby. This town will be my final resting place along with my daughter and whoever's to follow. I'm tired of trying to rewrite history without some careful thought. I've got 80-some years of history. Christopher Columbus committed abhorrent acts. Christopher Columbus was part of a group of Europeans that brought smallpox here, that killed our Native Americans. I've grown up in a time period since the 30s when I've read about lynchings. You want to correct something? Let's go back to our founding. Let's go back to 1900. Everybody wants to blame somebody. Current administration notwithstanding. Pick any president in history of America, brave people who stood up on the chance of being put to death by the British and created a country here. Well, we had slave owners, Washington, not Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, maybe not Van Buren. We had slave owners then. These are all products of the time in which they grew up. We've become so politically conscious now that we look to find a blame or to have a cause. That's commendable. But let's not, if we're going to remove Columbus as a symbol of this city, probably started with pride and with patriotism. Let's paint over the water tower and let's change the name of the town too.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Anybody else wish to speak this evening? What's your name, sir? Kevin. So just to be clear, we are doing 2-minute intervals now for people that are not signed up. So just Kyle will let you know when your time is expired. Thank you.
Just something really simple. If you guys do some history reading, I'm reading a book about Christopher Columbus and actually reading the journal that he wrote. And if you guys want to read, you can just Google it, actually read the journals that he wrote personally, instead of somebody writing about revised history of what he thought he wrote. Just read about the journals that he actually wrote and see what he actually said and what he actually did, not just what somebody else thought he said and did. Just so if you want to do your history, just Google different, there's a whole bunch of books about actually the journals that he wrote. So just do a little history about it or research on it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next up, what's your name? Frank, what was your last name? Sorry.
Rolke.
Okay.
I'm a recent graduate of Columbus High School and a proud member of Columbus. I would just like to say that I agree with my peers that the statue of the man does not represent what the city of Columbus stands for. We stand for love and acceptance and peace, and that man, Christopher Columbus, committed horrendous atrocities. And honestly, I pity the people who disagree with me because they say, we're not learning history. We're not learning history. It's not accurate. Well, the conquerors write the books of history. People don't understand that if you committed thousands of atrocities and you got to write what history was, you wouldn't admit to that, would you? Francisco Franco was a dictator that overtook Spain, committed thousands and thousands of murders and mass executions. In fact, Spain has the second most mass graves in the world, only coming second to Laos. But when he took over, he indoctrinated all the children. Everyone in Spain came to think that he was a hero. He was their savior. He was the person who was to bring them ultimate happiness in life. And he was a Christian, and he did all those things in the name of Christianity. And now I'm a Christian myself, but I am not going to sit here and listen to people argue that Christianity is inherently good and anything done in the name of Christianity is not good. Thousands and thousands upon Native Americans were murdered, raped, enslaved by Christopher Columbus. It is unacceptable to sit here and say, history is not what the kids are learning. No, I'm sorry, we're learning the true history of our nation. We're learning what actually happened. And yes, it's an uncomfortable feeling to recognize that the history that you grew up to love, to be patriotist for, is something to be ashamed of. But you know what? It's uncomfortable to grow, but it's necessary. And we as a city need to grow. We need to grow with the world, we need to grow with our country, and we need to grow as the world has grown.
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. Come forward, state your name, please.
Hello, my name is Quinn Altman. I am a recent graduate of Columbus High School. I was also in AP US History, and I received a 4 on that test, meaning I passed the test. And I'd like to say that when I did learn history, and we did learn what Columbus did, and also forcing a religion on a group of people who already have their own beliefs and their own way of thinking about what a higher power is not a correct way of thinking. And honestly, using religion to justify forcing a group of people that are already here to think the way you do and to indoctrinate them into a system that you believe is correct is not what we should be thinking in the 21st century. And that is what Columbus stands for. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman, I just have a footnote, real quick.
I'm not sure that we can allow somebody to speak twice. Is
Sorry,
that,
I left out, there's another
that-
petition happening.
what's that?
If everybody else is
Yeah.
speaking.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Okay, Jack, you mean first?
Real quickly, there's 2 petitions out. My computer's been in the shop for a week, and I just got it back. We're up to like 500 signatures opposing the original signatures, and I'm not sure how it's going to run. I haven't even seen what kind of names I have on there, but it's closing in on 500, and I'm not sure how that will wrap up. And another footnote was that, the other people testifying today are judging Columbus by today's standards. The man lived 500 years ago in an entirely different era. It's unfair to judge any figure of history by today's standards. Thank you.
Okay, which one of you wanted to go? I don't think that there should be a back and forth. No. Is there anybody else that wish to speak? Okay. With that, I guess we're going to close the public comment regarding the petition section of this meeting. And move on to number 6, where we'll have a discussion here regarding the petition and what is the will of the council. Anybody want to chime in? Mike, you have your light on?
Before we move on too far from the public hearing portion, I wanted to point out that since we were trying to limit the number of people we have here in person, that we encourage people to send in emails prior, and we did receive, I believe we've got 19 emails in the summary here. Clerk Gable went through, along with the city administrator, to identify whether or not they were residents or not. So we've got 15 comments from residents and 4 from non-residents. And also I had asked the clerk to photocopy a letter that I had received in my city mailbox February 27th, 2020 from a visitor to the community concerning the statue. So those are all part of the record as well. Actually, what I will do is, if you're all right with that, I'd like to read off the names of the people so that they know that we've received those emails and that they'll be part of the record. The first one is Abigail Adams, who's here in person as well. Mary Arnold, Lisa Sestkowski, Michael Clark, Kelly Crombie, Dale, or no, sorry, that's not a resident. Tom Meitzel, David O'Brien, Larry Olson, Adam Pulver, Mark Pfeifferon, John Salzwedel, Richard Sheard, Henry St. Maurice, and Jonathan Stabell, Staebell, and John Van Roo. Those were the residents that submitted emails. Thank you.
Any comments from the council, discussion-wise? Ian?
First off, I would like to commend Abigail for taking the initiative of starting the petition, and I'm beside myself with how happy I am to see young people stepping up and trying to do something that they believe is good and just for our city and our community. I would also like to point out that we are not a Christian nation. We're not founded as a Christian nation and are not today. That is not our history. And I would personally like to say that although Columbus did bring America into the light of Europe and start a lot of things that could be viewed as good, he did also do things that weren't. And while our city shares an anglicized version of his name, I do not believe he is someone that we need to honor and have a statue of.
Thoughts from council in addition? Alder Reed.
Well, I guess first off, I'm just beyond moved by the kindness and thoughtfulness of our young people. I had no idea. I'm so amazed, so impressed, and so hopeful for the general future. For the statue itself, I've long been pretty ambivalent on it. As a symbol for oppression and genocide and slavery, I would like to see it find a different location, but I've just been so moved.
Alder Pfeifferon here. I guess I would like to just say that I'm glad that we had someone that would dialogue, whether it be we agree or we disagree, but everybody needs to express their opinions, and I think we as council have a lot to work with and a lot of our own personal opinions that are coming into, but our personal opinions really are not the case here. It's the opinion of the people, and that's what we have to weigh, and that's what we have to really weigh heavily. You know, I mean, I too applaud the young historians, if you will, that graduated from Columbus High School or are attending Columbus High School, but at the same time, the people are speaking as well, so I think we have a huge challenge ahead of us right now.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, just Alder McCabe here. Wanted to thank Abigail for bringing this discussion to the city. I think its time has come to discuss the statue, I guess you could say, and in times of crisis come opportunity, and I hope we can find a positive outcome to this. Thank you.
Mike?
I'll make a comment. This has been a pretty contentious time, not just for this issue, but I think if you turn on the news right now, there's a lot going on in this nation and this world. I've been criticized for not acting quick enough on this issue, that this should have been on the agenda weeks ago, and I've been really trying to find a balance to make sure that we're getting all of the information that we can get about how this statue appeared in Columbus, when it appeared here, taking into consideration the youth, the movement that's happening right now that you're seeing on the news, you know, every night. I commend young people for caring and getting involved, but there's a balance between swift justice that you see on television where people are removing a statue and throwing it into a river versus having a conversation like this, which I think is very important. So I appreciate everyone's patience and that we're having a civil conversation here. That's the way I think that we need to do it in Columbus, because I think that reflects the character of the community.
I would echo very similar statements. I knew that this was going to be a very contentious atmosphere here this evening, and I want to thank everybody who showed up just for being, you know, kind to one another. We are not all going to have the same opinions and ideals, and I really appreciate everybody showing up this evening so that we can hear you and we can hear your opinions and your voice. And I'm not sure exactly what we are going to do as a council moving forward. I can tell you that I don't think that there's going to be a swift decision, as Mike put it, this evening. I think we have gathered quite a bit of information, and you know, it's been interesting to hear from those people across so many different generations, all within the same community, having such different opinions. And I don't think that this is something that I think the way that the history is taught has been changed, in which lens you're viewing it through. And I think everybody believes in their heart of hearts that they, you know, that they want to do the right thing, but everybody has a difference in a great difference in opinion in that. So I guess at this point I'm asking the council, what do we want to do moving forward? We have, as Attorney Johnson told us earlier, we have three options in how we leave this meeting. One is to move this issue forward to a future committee of the whole meeting where we would have a discussion on that and potentially even more information and more input from residents. You know, I'm sure that we would continue to receive emails and remarks. Another is, I guess we could go one way or the other. I mean, we could do nothing, or we could immediately do something. What is the will of the council?
The will of Alderman Whitefront is to move it forward to another committee to hold, because there's just way too much to discuss, as you say, swiftly.
Alder Gray.
So one more thing that I would like to point out before I say what I would personally choose to do is we have to remember that civil rights are for the minority, not the majority. And I don't believe that we need more petitions or anything of that nature. We will, if you wait for a minority to get a majority vote, nothing happens. I would personally prefer to move this to the next council meeting, regular council meeting, for a vote to remove the statue. We can figure out the cost and where it goes after, but I would like to have it on record of removing it, and then perhaps the Knights of Columbus or other people that have came up can give us more information on what they would do to take it or where it could go.
I would like to move it to another committee of the whole for further discussion. I'd like to gather some information. A couple of people had made offerings of adopting said statue, and I would just like to find out where it could possibly go. Before it's time to actually have the vote.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to at least move, at the very least, have more discussion at the next council meeting on it, and maybe come up in the meantime with some different ideas.
I don't disagree with more conversation. I think that's always good. I will tell you one of the concerns that I have in recent weeks is people are seeing images of these statues being removed. There have been threats already for the statue, and I think if what I'm hearing from most people, regardless of their idea of the statue, that if it's going to be preserved for some sort of a historic cause and we need to find a home for it, how long is it going to be there before someone removes it before we do? So I think if there's a balance of preservation in there somewhere, I'm concerned that we're going to become a target. I mean, there's media here this evening. If you Google Columbus, Wisconsin, you can find us pretty easily. The cat's out of the bag. So I think that's a concern of mine, is that if there's some intent of trying to find a recipient to take care of it outside of the city, that I think we're at risk there. And dragging it out for another month, we may be in the news for a different reason. I just wanted to point that out.
I agree completely, and that's part of the reason why I think we should move it to the next regular council meeting, take a vote to whether or not we're going to remove the statue entirely, and we can figure out the best place for it. Multiple people have come forward saying that they would take it. We can figure that out after we decide whether or not it stays.
Trina.
I will change my position, and I would be fine moving it to the next regular meeting.
The next regular meeting is 1 week from today.
Yes, I'm okay with that too.
I too am okay.
Okay, sounds like we have overwhelming consensus for the next regular meeting to have a vote on this issue, and possibly at that time have further information, hopefully, about if the vote results in removing the statue, that we would have some options for that readily available in our council packets. So, Mayor Tome?
I think the difficulty of that is that staff has already been trying to communicate with people to find out if the original donor wanted it back. We're of the understanding that they do not want it back. The Knights of Columbus, the gentleman that spoke this evening, there's no guarantee that there is a recipient in 1 week. We do have policy within the city that I think if the council needs to take action, it just needs to decide whether it's going to need to take the statue down and put it somewhere to preserve it until a recipient comes forward, or whether it stays in place until a recipient comes forward. I think there's a difference between the two. So I just think part of the petition process was, I think there was some language in there about possibly preserving it. I don't think that you wanted to see it destroyed, but it becomes very difficult for the city to navigate that when the city doesn't own a museum to put it in. We need to have a partner and we need to have a recipient to put it into a museum. Again, Joe made a comment earlier about putting it in his backyard. I think, that would be great, but I think there's going to be some zoning concerns would be an issue, and that's already come up as well, even if it was, received by the Knights of Columbus. That's another step as well. So I think there's a lot of small details that need to be ironed out yet, but I think if it's going to be preserved somewhere in this community, it's going to have to find a place where it would fall within zoning, and it would have to be taken down before someone else would possibly destroy it or deface it.
So are you suggesting that we don't move this forward to the next regular meeting, I guess? Does that impact?
I think we'll have to take action. I think what we need to do is follow the policy that we have for any other asset, that it just needs to kind of follow the course. It's offered to local civic organizations as a possible donation if they can use it, but it would have to, we can't force it on anybody. That's my point, I guess.
I'd like to suggest a referendum community-wide.
Mayor Tom?
I have heard that suggestion from several emails. I have.
Spring, maybe.
That prolongs the issue we're talking about right now.
Take it down, we'll put up a bigger one.
Well, you wouldn't be able to put back a bigger one into the encroachment that's currently existing. I think that's another misperception, is people want to take this down and put something else up, and that's not a possibility. If something comes down out there, nothing else is going up there because it's in the DOT right of way. And that's an option that, as Jack explained, that the council could consider, but it's 4 months before the November election if you wanted to do a citywide referendum.
I see any consent? No? Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing is we'll have the vote next Tuesday, and then potentially, depending upon the outcome of that vote, we'll deliberate on whether or not, if it's staying, it's staying. If it's going, we will, at that time, figure out a plan for the asset to the asset ordinance, or put it through that process. So
I support a referendum
okay.
among the citizens of Columbus and not anybody we can get a signature on.
Okay. All right, any other discussion in council on that? Kyle, do you have everything you need? Do you have any questions or comments?
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're looking for this to come back as an agenda item. Are you looking for us to propose certain options, or is that yet to be really deliberated on the 7th at the regular meeting?
Go ahead, Mike, if I can see.
I think we need to know how to refine the agenda item.
Yeah.
That we can't have 3 or 4 options to vote on. The agenda item has to, ask for potential action. So I think Kyle's just looking for some refinement and direction on that.
So, I mean, direction for the asset to go, I don't know how, essentially, I don't know what the vote's going to be, so I can't. Trina?
I suppose I'm wondering if we should have the yes or no vote on the regular agenda, and then for next time's cow, that we will have a segment put aside for discussion, depending on the votes. Were you
I'm open
proposed
to that.
options?
Yeah, that could certainly work. The difficulty on the first, if it's only on the regular council meeting, we won't really be able to provide a whole lot of details on the different options if we don't know if the intent is, do you want options on removing, do you want options on trying to approach DOT and buy the land back, exactly what we're trying to accomplish. So that would be another way to accomplish it, is just
Having a placeholder.
Yeah, have a placeholder in both meetings, and then although I guess just looking at the regular council meeting, I'm not certain what you would be what the title of the item would be. Statue, I mean, are we talking removing the statue or keeping the statue, or is that yet to be determined? That's where I'm not clear.
I think probably it would be whether or not to remove the statue is what we'd be voting on specifically.
Yes.
And just as a point of, I guess, clarification, the statue as it sits is not on our property. We don't have permission for it to be there, yet it is. So at any time, even if the council did wish to leave it as is, at any point, we could get a communication from the Department of Transportation that asked us to remove our property. So really, I think we could delay the inevitable, but at some course, it's going to be either move it and replace it, or move it and do some other disposition. Staying where it is short-term is probably viable until we get that notification. And then we're going to be forced in a short order to make a decision.
Makes sense. Ian, Gray?
Yeah, that was my intention the entire time, was a very simple yes/no vote on its removal for the council, and then a placeholder on the cow in future talk of if we vote to remove it, where it's going to go, best recipients, where the money comes from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and with any asset that we would have. But I think for now, we just need a simple yes or no vote, or like the mayor said, it opens us up to potential vandalism. If people know that it's going to be removed, it's far less likely to be vandalized. There's a lot of good reasons, but I think just voting to remove it or not is what we need to do right away.
So I think what Kyle was trying to say is regardless of whether we want to put that on as an agenda item to remove the statue from where it sits today, eventually, inevitably, most likely, the DOT at some point can say, hey, get off my land, and we'll have no time to put together a plan for where the statue will go. Is that what I'm gathering, Kyle?
Yeah, essentially, my anticipated outcome of that vote is almost a unanimous yes, that it has to be moved because it doesn't have the right to be there.
Yeah.
Regardless of your feelings on the statue itself. So I just don't know that vote is as helpful as figuring out a real plan for what we want to do with it. Because I feel like one way or the other, it could have to move regardless of the intention of the council.
I had Kyle's point on my list of pros and cons, I guess, for each category as well, is that this wasn't dealt with when it could have been dealt with a few years ago, I guess, when, Christopher Columbus wasn't as contentious as it is currently in the news or the statues. So I think ultimately making a decision, like Kyle mentioned, this could come up in a year or 2 or 3 years or 10 years if there's another highway project out there. I don't know. I can't predict that. The other thing I think is if there is a vote at the next council meeting to either keep it or remove it, I think at that point, if it's removed, then it can be put into maybe the DPW or some place where it's protected until someone can receive it to do with what they wish. But then that gives the staff the ability to work with any zoning issues or anything else if it's going to be located here or elsewhere. So.
Okay. So I guess what we need to know is what we want exactly as the agenda item on the next meeting agenda. And I heard Ian's point once, just a simple yes or no vote. What is your position? Are there any other opinions of what should be the agenda item next week?
I think probably the most simplistic way would be a yes or no vote, just right off the bat.
I'm just, yeah, I'm fine with that. I guess, and knowing now that, that the property is owned by the DOT, and that this could happen at any time, they could ask us to potentially move the statue, that it's sort of a ticking time bomb. So I'm okay with that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, Kyle, or is that? Okay. All right. Any further discussion on anything from any council members from tonight's? No. Okay, with that, I'll move on to number 7, which is take a motion to adjourn.
Alder Gray moves to adjourn.
Alder Pfeiffer will second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.